Welcome back to another episode of Silent Pals Go to the Movies. This is another Throwback Thursday review. I'm here with my friend Touly. Say hi, Touly.
Hi, guys.
And today we're going to be reviewing Alive. And just a fair warning, there's going to be spoilers up ahead, so you've been warned. An Uruguayan rugby team stranded in a snowy, swept Andes and forced to use desperate measures to survive after a plane crash. So this movie is based on a real plane crash that happened in 1972. Also, this is not the only movie made based on the story of the survivors, but it is the first English and first to touch upon the fact that they fed on the dead to survive. So like always, let's start with my pros. The cast. We see some famous names now, such as Leona Douglas, Ethan Hawke, Josh Hamilton, and also John Malkovich, who also begins the movie as the narrator, who is Carlito. Next, let's talk about scenery from the film in 1993 and the location in Canada, along with the special effects such as the elements and the plane part, which still holds up in some regard. It does give you the feeling that they are flying back in the 1970s, and some of the shots from the interior of the plane during the crash are amazing. Because you do see that some of the people are flying out and you see some of the devastating things that happened during the plane crash. So it gives you the impact of what the people are going through and the damage the plane is taking as they're crashing. Now, let's talk about the location. They filmed in the mountains of Canada, which gives you the impact similar to what they were going through. And I want to touch upon that some of the cast members did fast for 2 days or so to give the idea to themselves of what the survivors went through, because some of the survivors did visit them on the set. So when they went through the fasting process for 2 days, they got a glimpse of what these people, the survivors who went to visit them, were enduring while they were in the mountains for 72 days and why they had to resort to what they had to do to survive. For this simple fact that the scenery and the location was what the actors were touching upon and using to touch into their acting skills. Yes, some people said that it did come through. Some people would say that it did not come through. But just the fact that the actors did that will give you a glimpse that they actually got touched by the survivors that went onto the set and talked to them. The next pro on my list is the story. It's based on a real event, of course, and I recall that it was being talked about when this movie came out among my parents and their friends. And they recalled it not just that it was a popular movie, it's that they were recalling that they remember it being on TV and newspapers and that it was a big deal that these people survived 72 days in the mountains. So I watched it. I felt it was a simple story about one person and how he went for help mixed with other stuff the first time I saw it with my parents. And that was the impact I got because I did not really think about what it meant for these people. I was a kid. So when I saw it, it was just a simple story for me. But now that I'm an adult and I see it, to me, it's more than that. It's what it takes to survive. That's what I got out of this movie. And basically, it's what would you do to survive? That's what the whole movie to me boils down to. Yes, you might see it that there's no action. You might see that no drama. There's no backstory, the characters, this and that. But the whole idea is that out of this whole group of people, 16 people survived and they had to do what they had to do to survive. Especially the main person of the movie, which is Nando, played by Ethan Hawke. He had to endure what he had to endure and push through to basically bring help. So now on to my cons. Let's touch upon the special effects really quick, which is one special effect in particular. It's the plane crash. It did not age well, and I'm talking about the CG model. It was a bit hard for me to see since everything else of the crash was, to my standard, fine. Everything else that I talked about in my pros about the plane crash was pretty good, as you saw people were flying, people were getting cut, being tossed around in the plane crash. That was okay. But when it came to the CG model of the plane crash, it did not age well. It's just a little nitpick thing. It's not to do that movies have to age well with me, but it's just one of the things that did not age well. Now moving on. I'm going to touch upon two actors who played the same character, John Malkovich and Bruce Ramsey. Their acting, or should I say their accent and lack of accent. Both actors played the same character, who is Carlitos Paez. Bruce played the younger version while John played the older version. But the issue I have is that Bruce played the younger version with an accent while John played the older version with no accent. Either you play both versions with an accent or you lose the accent. You can't have one with an accent and one without. Yes, all the survivors in the movie are Uruguayan, of course, so it's fine for them to all have accents, but not for one version, the young version, to have it and the older version all of a sudden to lose it, especially since I have seen interviews with the real Carlitos Paez and he does have an accent. So that's one of my biggest cons about this. On to my next con. The story. It's a long story that is based on a book of the 16 survivors that was written 2 years after the plane crash, what they called the miracle. I don't like to use that word because it's not a miracle to the people who did not survive or the family members of those who did not survive or make it out alive. So why not have John Malkovich as Carlitos begin to tell the story in chapters or days or parts, or for example have each survivor take over in parts narrating till we end up at the end with Nando, played by Ethan Hawke, as he goes in search for help in his final trip. Also, we didn't see Nando and his friend go down for help, and for a fact I know from seeing documentaries that they both ended up going down and they found a rancher and asked for help, and Nando went back in the helicopter as we saw in the movie. And because surviving for 72 days and having to resort to eating the dead and with no backstory to these characters doesn't really scream 2-hour-long movies to me. I don't know what to say about this. I'm not trying to take anything away from this being a true event. I'm just saying, if you are basing this off a book, just keep to the facts. Just put everything that's in the book that's interesting. I want to see Nando go down and basically almost, like it says in the book, that he almost died and they ended up almost dying. But in his last step, he found a rancher and he got saved. And the people who were back in the mountain heard in the radio that 2 people ended up getting rescued, leaving the mountains from the plane crash, and help was on the way. This is the story I wanted to see as a movie. People celebrating Nando and his friend making it down the mountain instead of just hearing the helicopters and seeing Ethan Hawke, coming back and saving them. It's not about him coming to save him. It's about the hope they were sending with him to go down the mountain. I guess with that, I'm going to pass it on to my friend Touly and see how he saw this movie and what grade he gave the movie.
This was my first time watching it live, and I'm going to precedent my review of the film by saying that it's challenging to review a film like this because of what happened. And again, we could throw out words out there depending on your perspective on life, what Sal said, whether it's a miracle that these people survived, what some of these people went through, and the family they went through, it was a tragedy. I do not want to downplay that. And in a way, I want to separate this from my review by starting off with this commentary, because I don't want anything that I say afterwards to give people the feeling that what happened in the actual event did not matter. It's just something that's difficult to talk about because I don't want to come off sounding negative or outrightly joyful that there were survivors that came out of this particular event. So I just want to, again, precedent this by saying that what happened to the people who survived this, the people who were involved in this, the people who didn't survive, those things I am not gonna critique or have any say on. It is what it is. It happened, and it's just challenging to talk about in that retrospect. With that being said, I'll move on to my review of the film in terms of the entertainment factor, what Sal and I normally talk about when we watch a film. So the cover of the film, or I suppose maybe it's the poster of the film too, it says it's based on a true story. And when I saw that, and knowing too now that it's one of those survival drama sort of movies that takes place out in the cold, at first, I had this vision in my mind as to how they were going to go about this film, because I think there has been 1 or 2 films. I know there was at least one film that we reviewed on the podcast here about a man who was stranded out there in the snowy mountains and had to fight for survival. So I was expecting something to that degree in a way. Again, not one for one, but just certain elements that maybe Alive was going to head into, but it didn't. And I think maybe as a positive, I could look at it in that retrospect, that it didn't go down your standard cliche sort of storytelling. For example, there weren't any animal encounters. So as much as this film was about fighting for survival and how you dealt with it, especially in a situation where these individuals have never been in themselves, it wasn't so much about them versus the wild in a way, or nature. It felt more of a psychological thing where they had to overcome mental challenges, from choosing whether or not they wanted to feast on the dead, from their perspective of how to overcome their situation, where they're going to just give up, how they would rally. Like I said, that's probably one of the things I will praise this film for, in a way, that it stood its ground and tried to be, I wouldn't say different, but just be what it is. But at the same time, I don't know if this was the intentional direction of the film, or if there wasn't as much creative freedom, because it was based on a true story. And when you're kind of hovering over that line, I don't know, unless, I have inside information or further information from the director or the people who were, making the film, as to how much they wanted to deviate from what actually happened, because they didn't want to dishonor, the people who were involved. So I get it if they didn't have that sort of a freedom, and that maybe they wanted to take the film in a different direction and still call it based on a true story. So there's that. I would say the scene that caught my eye the most, that really engrossed me in the film, which is kind of unfortunate in a way too, because it was pretty much when the plane crashed into the mountains, and what transpired. Like, that was very, very intense. And it really left me in one of those moments where I was just witnessing stuff and I couldn't believe what I was seeing, in a way. But other than that, in terms of the pacing of the film, how involved I was for the rest of the movie, I think the film, again, from the entertainment aspect and not its biographical capture of the true events, in terms of how the story progressed and how the characters developed and their relationships and whatnot, I feel the film could have been better. And I'm saying this from a couple of perspectives. One, that the film did make me believe that once things have quote unquote settled after the initial traumatization that some of these individuals went through, that I felt like that was portrayed well, that I believed in these characters and what they were going through, especially, again, for individuals who have never gone through this themselves. So that I can stand by. Sal mentioned the accent of one of these characters, and for me, I kind of pushed that onto all of the characters, really. Having found out that they're from Uruguay, I was expecting a stronger accent from all of the characters, but because I didn't get that sort of feeling, it kind of lost me there in that retrospect. Also, as the days went by, the film not being focused on the survivors versus nature, in a way, it was just about how they acted around one another. I didn't get the feeling that their condition was worse, or their condition was worsening as they were approaching the 71st day. To me, they didn't look as different as they did on that 71st day than when they suffered the plane crash. The transitioning wasn't there. I was expecting a lot of them to have been worn out, not having the energy, the looks on their faces, their physical appearance, things that you would sort of expect from this type of a film. I didn't get that feeling. And this is also a reflection of how they acted as well, the amount of energy they still had to be that way around one another. The film was okay for me in the end. I wish they would have showed me whom the two individuals who made it beyond the snowy mountains, whom they interacted with, that enabled them to bring back help to the survivors. It was a pretty dry cut. It feels like I just have to take it for what it is, but I would have liked to see that interaction because of what these individuals went through to get to where they needed to go. So strictly speaking, from those sort of films that Sal and I have already seen, man versus nature, the one thing that I would probably look at this film as the major negative is the portrayal of these characters while they were in their situation. I didn't find it believable beyond the initial point of the plane crashing and how they acted to that situation. Like beyond that, I thought the portrayal of these characters could have been better. But, you know, as I iterated at the beginning of my commentary here, it is something challenging to talk about because I don't want to downplay what happened. But if I were to just review the film for what it is, then I think I've seen better. So I'm going to give this film a 5.5 out of 10 as my final score.
So I see your point. I just want to basically clarify your point for people is that what you wanted to see was them degrade a little more in their physique and drive the point home that they are actually starving instead of what you said, that you saw them just go from day 1 to day 71 almost in the same physical aspect and energy wise. Like you said, you've seen other films where the character or the protagonist suffers and basically starves himself and loses so much weight. And I think we saw that in the movie Arctic. So in that sense, I do see your point. Like you said, not to take away from the story, this is based on real story. It's not a story with action. It's like you said, it's a story about people who survived. It's not about people who fought, animals in nature. Yeah, I just want to make a few points that we did have the actual Nando. He was on set as a technical advisor to the film. And I believe this is the reason why we did have in this movie the emphasis that they did feed off the dead. The other thing I wanted to see at the end of the movie was each of the actors to actually be next to the survivor they played. And yes, some of the survivors did go on to the set, so why not take a picture with them and at the end of the movie close off the movie with that picture. So with that, my grade is going to be a little higher than Touly's. I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. It could have been better. It could have held your attention a little better. Could have been shorter and more concise. But other than that, it was still an enjoyable movie. I'm not going to take it away from the survivors. It's a story they lived through. And like we said, it's not we're criticizing their story. We're just criticizing the movie, how they made the movie. So that does it for the review of Alive. Please join us next time where we're going to review Airplane.
Can you fly this plane and land it?
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Please like, comment, and subscribe. You can find our social media links below. And like always, keep watching movies.